You ever look up at a massive bridge or a towering skyscraper and just wonder, what's stopping all of that from just collapsing? Well, it's not magic. It's a field of engineering called statics. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the invisible science that holds our entire world together.
I mean, just look at this excavator. It's a beast, right? It's effortlessly moving tons of weight. But what's stopping that huge, heavy arm from just toppling the whole machine over? The answer is a perfectly calculated balance of forces. And that, right there, is the very heart of statics. And of course, it's not just excavators. This same question applies to pretty much every big structure we rely on. Why doesn't a bridge just buckle under the constant weight of traffic? How can a skyscraper stand up to hurricane-force winds? The answer is always the same. They are designed to exist in a perfect state of balance, or what engineers call equilibrium. So what is statics officially? Well, it's the part of mechanics that deals with objects in equilibrium. But for us, that just means things that aren't moving. They're standing perfectly still. The whole game is to understand and calculate all the forces needed to keep things exactly where you want them.
Now, to really get a grip on statics, we've got to learn to speak its language. And that language is all about forces. All the little pushes and pulls that are acting on an object. But we can't just talk about them vaguely. We need a way to describe them with some real precision.
And that's where a tool called a vector comes in. A vector isn't just a number. It's a special kind of quantity that has both magnitude, that's the how much, and direction, the which way. Think about it. If I say I'm pushing something with 10 pounds of force, that's not enough information, is it? Am I pushing up, down, to the left? You see? Without both pieces of info, the description is totally useless. That's why vectors are so critical. So what happens when you have a bunch of different forces all acting on one thing? How do you figure out their combined effect? Well, engineers use this really simple graphical method called the tip-to-tail technique. You just draw your first force vector, and then you stick the tail of the second vector right onto the tip of the first one. The combined force, or what we call the resultant, is just a new arrow you draw from your absolute starting point to your final ending point. Now keep that little visual in your head. It's going to be really important in just a minute. So if we can add forces together to see the result, how do we get something to not move at all? Well, that brings us to the single most important concept in all of statics, equilibrium. The easiest way to think about it is like a perfect tug of war. If you have one team pulling to the left with the exact same amount of force that the other team is pulling to the right, what happens? Right, absolutely nothing. The rope doesn't budge. The forces are perfectly balanced. That stalemate is static equilibrium. And in the language of mathematics, we express this incredibly powerful idea with one simple, elegant equation. That sigma symbol, that's the Greek letter sigma. It just means the sum of. And F, well, that stands for forces. So this equation literally just says the sum of all forces equals 0. This is the golden rule. And hey, think back to our tip-to-tail method for a second. What this equation means, visually, is that if you add up all the force vectors acting on an object, the tip of the very last one will land exactly where the tail of the first one started. You get a closed loop. There's no resultant force left over. They all just cancel each other out perfectly. Now, to make this practical, engineers break that one big equation down into simpler parts. For a 2D problem, it really just boils down to two simple checks. First, do all the horizontal forces, all the lefts and rights, cancel each other out? And second, do all the vertical forces, the ups and downs, also cancel out? If you can answer yes to both of those questions, you've got equilibrium. But wait, there's a catch. An object can have all of its pushes and pulls perfectly balanced and still not be in equilibrium. We need to add one more ingredient to our recipe for stability. Because what if the forces are balanced, but they're causing the object to spin? You see, true stability means no translation. That's no moving side to side or up and down. But it also means no rotation. This twisting tendency is what engineers call a moment. A moment isn't just about how hard you push, but where you push. The best analogy is using a wrench. If you push on the wrench right near the bolt, you're not going to get much rotation. But if you apply that exact same force at the very end of the handle, suddenly you create this powerful twisting effect. That effect, that's the moment. And the calculation is beautifully simple. The moment is just the force you apply, multiplied by the perpendicular distance from the pivot point. This means you have two ways to create a bigger twist, either push harder or apply that force farther away. This is the principle of leverage right here in action. And this brings us to our second golden rule for true equilibrium.
Not only do all the forces have to sum to zero, but all the moments have to sum to zero too. All of those twisting effects have to cancel each other out.
So here's the complete picture. For an object to be truly, completely static, two things must be true. First, every push is balanced by an equal and opposite pull. And second, every clockwise twist is perfectly balanced by a counterclockwise twist. When both of those conditions are met, that object is absolutely rock solid.
Okay, so now we have our two golden rules. Sum of forces equals zero, and sum of moments equals zero. So how do engineers actually use these to analyze something super complex, like that excavator we saw?
They start with a tool called the free body diagram, and honestly, this might be the single most important concept in all of statics. The idea is to mentally isolate the object you care about, that's the body, and draw it free from everything else that's touching it. Then you simply replace all those connections with arrows that represent the forces and moments they're putting on the body.
So let's go back to our excavator. To analyze its arm, an engineer would draw the arm all by itself, floating in space. They'd add vectors for the weight of the arm, the weight of the dirt in the bucket, the powerful push from the hydraulic cylinders, and all the forces at the pivot points. Once they have that diagram, they can apply our two golden rules and solve for any unknown force they need.
This little map here shows us exactly where statics fits into the bigger world of engineering. You see, you start with the fundamentals, from physics and calculus. That knowledge flows right into statics, where we focus on no movement. But once you've mastered that, you can move on to dynamics, which is all about things in motion, or mechanics of solids, which looks at how materials bend and break under force. But as you can see, statics is the critical gateway. It is the foundation for all of it.
So why should any of this matter to you if you're not planning on being an engineer? Well, because these principles are the unseen foundation of the entire modern world. The safety and stability that we just take for granted every single day is a direct result of these rules being applied correctly. Every beam, every column, every cable has been analyzed to make absolutely sure the sum of forces and the sum of moments are both zero, keeping it all securely in place.
So the next time you look at a bridge or a crane or even just the chair you're sitting on, take a moment. Think about that invisible, silent tug-of-war being played out inside it. What are the unseen forces, all in perfect equilibrium, holding your world together right now?